he had two videos side by side, and they were the same exact video, same exact talk track. And so one of them was AI and one of them was actually him. And to be honest with you, I actually couldn't tell the difference.
I use it, but I don't like how it's being used in these ways, or like I'm going to use it all the way. It is going to become one of the most politically charged things I think that happens over the next 5 to 10 years.
They don't really get it. Like they don't understand editing, right? They think you're a content marketer, like can you just do it? Or like can't that writer just do it? But writing and editing are two different skill sets.
Real talk backed up with real action. This is GTM News Desk.
I'm Nick Bennett.
And I'm Mark Hillens.
Let's see what's trending. All right, welcome to another GTM News Desk episode. Super excited about this one. We have a fantastic guest that's in our third segment today. I'm sure you all know her. Amanda Natividad really breaks down zero-click content. You're going to love it. But we've got some headlines that we want to talk about beforehand. I'm going to kick things off here with our first story of the day. And I think this one's a little interesting. Semrush, they put out a blog recently about content marketing statistics. And I figured we could dive into kind of like some of those content marketing statistics because I think some of them are interesting. And Mark, I don't have a content marketing background by any means. I know maybe you don't either, but I think that like we've done enough.
Oh, I do, Nick. You don't know me. I have a content marketing background. What do you mean?
Well, I guess. I mean, we could all say we have content marketing backgrounds. Like I post content on LinkedIn. Does that?
I was going to say, dude, everyone creates content these days thanks to freaking Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs' iPhone. Everyone creates content.
That's true. All right, let's get into a few things. So I want to call out a few of these statistics here. So there was one about long form content. And funny enough, our guest, Amanda, she talks about content being too long. So we're talking about long form content, 3,000 plus words. It gets 3 times more traffic, 4 times more shares, and 3.5 times more backlinks than shorter articles, which is interesting. Now, I think it's impressive. Now, I mean, again, I'm just taking this. Reading the data. I don't know if I've tested this personally. Like, I feel like for me, my sweet spot's about 1,500 words. But from a B2B context, I feel like depth and quality of insights are paramount. So like when you think about how long form content works, and it works well because you can have a comprehensive like breakdown of a topic, which depending on your industry, your niche segment, all those things make sense. But I think it's essential to balance that depth with readability, which I feel like sometimes people forget about. Like, how do I like, as a content marketer, you're so stuck in your little zone, or as someone that creates content, you're stuck in your little zone that you forget about the readability and engagement piece. So how can you break long form content into digestible sections? How can you use visual elements? How can you provide executive summaries for people like, the exec teams that just don't have enough time to read it? And I think it's interesting because this is important I feel like a larger piece, like how do you chop up content into a bunch of different pieces and distribute it? But like, how do you focus on readability? And I'm curious on your thoughts on that piece.
Or better planning and better editing and better research. I mean, and practice makes perfect, maybe. If it does help, it does help a lot. There is not one single way to do content marketing. I mean, this thing from Semrush, 96 something stats. So there's an interesting thing happening right now in content marketing world. A lot of people are over-indexing a little bit too much maybe on this research-based content. That well will dry up. I mean, there's only so many times you can do this research. I would say that good research-based content, which this is, has a rhythm to it. Maybe it's once a year, maybe it's every 6 months, but it's not just publishing stats. Like, no offense, this Semrush thing kind of sucks. I'm calling Semrush out. It's just a bunch of bullshit stats that it's curated from all these places. So I don't even think it's their own research. Some of it might be, some of it is a lot of just curation. It's like, so what? Like, okay, you give me a stat. Like, who fucking cares? Like, give me the TLDR, the really sharp insight that says this is how you should think about this or act on it or do something with it, or like, give me the meat, not the potatoes. I am so excited to talk more to Amanda because I know she's very passionate about this idea of less is more. And when you just throw stats at people, it's like, you're not going to remember any of that stuff. It's like, cool, stats. Like, but when you add a personal story with that stat and give it life and make it actually something that jumps off the screen or jumps off the paper, you might have something better there. So I don't know, Semrush, and I'm not just calling you, I'm going to call out anyone, and I'm guilty of this. I've done this in my past jobs. You know, we didn't maybe do a good job of giving value with the stat. You're just throwing stats out. It's just, come on, we can do better.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, I think going through a lot of these stats, I agree. I'm just like, kind of reading them. I'm like, that's cool. But one thing, though, the last thing that I wanted to touch in on this, because I feel like it's something that we're leaning into, is video content. Statistics said video's the number one form of media used in content strategy, followed by blogs and infographics.
I don't believe that, Nick. Blogs?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm just curious how, like, I don't even know if I fully agree with this, but I mean, I fully agree that video content is number one, should be used more, because I feel like it goes back to like the whole people first thing. It humanizes your brand.
Dude, I'm looking at this, like, blogging continues to be a top marketing strategy. Yes, blogging is important. Like, it's important. Top marketing strategy. Should you use AI for blogging? Absolutely. But never to replace human writers, only to streamline their work. I mean, how many people have said that? Like, that is like, no, like, it's not interesting. Like, hey, blogging is important to making sure that you have the right representation of your brand and product on search, because people are always going to search. Great. Here's how we think about blogging today in an example. That's a much better way to explain this than just saying what everyone else is saying. And look, everyone, including ourselves, are guilty of this. It's not easy to get to this level of thoughtful content, genuine content. So I think the video thing is like, we've been saying this for forever. Like, guess what? Like, TV's been around for 100 years almost. Like, yes, video is very important and good. So I don't know. I may be just too negative right now about all this stuff, but I'm trying to give positive light to this, Nick, where you can do something like what Semrush has done, but do it in a way that truly injects a personality and a point of view into a research-based piece of content, and not just make it a listicle of stats, right? And not just, paint by 1,000 numbers or whatever, right? Like, just give it some texture, give it some like nice life. And that kind of goes into segment number 2, which is this whole thing with Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg, we already mentioned it once in this episode. I'm not a huge fan. I definitely gave up a lot of potential money by not investing in Facebook, even though I knew Facebook stock was going to do pretty well. I, on principle, Nick, did not invest in Facebook. And now I technically have, which kind of annoys me because I know in some of the mutual funds that Facebook's part of it. So it's like, I'm like, well, am I going to go to that extreme? Maybe I should. But anyway, I gave up Facebook, as you might know, Nick, in 2007. I've not logged in since, because I could see issues coming down the road. And you could say I was kind of right with some of these issues. But now I think Meta is doing something insane, which is they're letting people create AI versions of themselves. Which, look, do I believe that every single person on this planet will have an AI agent or multiple AI agents or whatever new terms we come up with that are going to help them live a better life? Yes, I'm excited about that. Maybe this is a step in that direction. I just feel like right now that the way that they're doing it, where it's like, hey, the new AI studio, you can create characters for Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger and the web, and it's kind of like a free-for-all. I just like, why? Like, why would you? So, Nick, why would you create an AI version of yourself? Would you do it?
Well, it's interesting because there's this other tool out there called, I think it's called like HeyGen or something like that. And so Ross Simmons was the one that told me about it. And so I saw him write something where he had 2 videos side by side, and they were the same exact video, same exact talk track. And so one of them was AI and one of them was actually him. And to be honest with you, I actually couldn't tell the difference. I had to go to the comments to be able to see which one was AI and which one wasn't. And so I actually, on one of my old podcasts, I had him on and I asked him about that. I said, what's the point of investing in like an AI version of yourself? And he said, to scale content. And I thought it was interesting because if you think about this in like, if you look at like a TikTok or I'm sure Instagram as well, it's like people are creating faceless channels and AI versions, and they're making tons of money through brand deals because it's so easy to create content. Go on like a ChatGPT or Claude or something, come up with this really interesting script or, whatever. And you basically just feed it into this software and it creates you doing it. And it's like, great. I don't actually have to get on camera. I don't have to go film myself. I don't have to edit anything. It just does it all for me. So that's where I could see it being. I get it. It could be kind of creepy, kind of weird because there's big channels out there that are they're 100% AI and they have millions of followers. And like some people don't even know it's AI, but it clearly says it. And I don't know. I'm just like, could that be a way to like scale content and like not having to shoot your own content? If you can make it look like I'm talking right now, and if that AI version could look exactly like me, word for word, it doesn't look like a robot or anything like that, I might actually try it.
Well, then why do we need you, Nick?
Well,
I'm just kidding. That's. I mean, it's like I'm kidding, but like seriously, it's a really great mental thought exercise around a table to have. I mean, look, going back to this article, Meta calls it out where they say this is an AI avatar person, so like it should be labeled like and there's a lot of accounts like you said that are just AI generated. I think what's happening, AI has become one of the most politically charged things, and you already see this on LinkedIn at least, where there are people taking sides. Like, I hate the AI, I use it, but I don't like how it's being used in these ways, or like I'm going to use it all the way. It is going to become one of the most politically charged things I think that happens over the next 5 to 10 years as it really kind of gets ingrained. And hopefully it can become something that is not so much about like the AI, but it's about how do people use it, which is going to ultimately what matters at the end of the day. It's like, who cares what the technology? It's like, what is the use and then the result of that use? And it is going to create, I think, the ability for more bad actors. I'm nervous about AI because I don't think unless we really are thoughtful about how we use it, it could easily be another whole social media shitstorm, which really is hurting the younger generations and even older generations. People's mental health, this is a fact, is being compromised day in and day out by social media, social networks. I am concerned gravely that AI is going to exacerbate that and even do more damage. So I don't know. I'm nervous.
Yeah, the next year will be interesting for sure.
So the conversation with Amanda is coming up, Nick. We're going to talk about algorithms. We've just talked about AI. I think there's a huge amount of crap that's going to happen because now AI is getting layered into algorithms. And companies are going to have to be very thoughtful and careful about how they use these technologies for hopefully the greater good. And when you think about content, which is what we're going to talk to Amanda about, Nick, how do we create content that is really going to be something that person who gets seen that content, usually now because of an algorithm or AI, or hopefully it comes from a person, right? There's some still social sharing happening in the world, is done in a thoughtful, the right way, and done in a way that's genuine. So, I mean, Amanda is a pro at this. She knows a ton about great content. She's talked a ton about and created the term, Nick, right? Zero-click content?
Yep.
She's the creator of that?
The creator.
She is going to help us all understand the balance between the algorithm, the human, and a little bit of the AI. Because, just the stuff that we talked about today with this stuff, with AI, I'm nervous. I am nervous. Are you nervous?
I'm nervous, but I'm excited. But yeah, still nervous. Absolutely.
I'm optimistic. That we can figure this stuff out. But like the last 15, 20 years of these algos and what's happened with social media, it gives me great pause. I will say that.
100%.
All right, let's go to segment 3 with Amanda.
All right, we are here for segment 3 of this episode. We're super excited. we have someone that I feel like I've known Amanda for years now. She's actually been on multiple other podcasts of mine. So I'm excited to have her here. If you don't know her, Amanda Natividad, she's the VP of marketing over at Sparktoro. Absolutely changing the game. One of the smartest people I know. And so I'm super stoked to have her here. We're going to kind of be diving into a few other things. Ultimately, we want to think about going beyond the traditional experiences and expectations around demand gen. And honestly, Sparktoro is changing the game. And I think Amanda's playing a big piece of that, of course, with Rand as well. But we're going to dive into it. Amanda, again, super stoked to have you here. I think you're going to add a lot of value. So, people know who you are. We'll make sure to link everything, but let's dive into kind of the first question here. And it's really pretty simple, but how do you make content today not suck?
How do you make content today not suck? You know what? Honestly, that's a really good question. I think that's a good way to phrase it, because when you think about content that sucks, you might think of content that's like commoditized. Anybody could create it. It's not interesting. It is rambly. Not helpful, right? I might describe a lot of content that sucks as AI generated content, right? Like we're starting to see a lot of people like feed crap into Chat GPT and then be like, hey, let's just use this for our content. And it sucks. And I think more and more, right, readers, users can spot this a mile away and they're like, I'm not going to read this, right? So when I think about content that doesn't suck, I think about things like, what would I actually want to read? Like if I were the target audience for this thing, would I want to read this? I think about things like, as the person writing it, right? As the writer, do I think this is interesting in some way? Does it amuse me? Right? Is this better than Chat GPT? That's kind of what I think about these days.
I love that. I know Mark has lots of thoughts around that because we've talked a lot about the AI side of things. But you know what's really pisses me off is like so many people on social now, like LinkedIn definitely, like people are just basically replying to comments using AI. And I feel like they're so easy to spot out. And it's like you would think they would get better with time, but I feel like, I don't know, it annoys me because like I like to reply to, like when I write content, like I reply to every single comment, and I can tell that it's AI written, but I still like feel like obligated to reply to it. And I don't know, it just makes me so mad because like deep down, like I really wish I didn't reply to this, but like, the algo will kill you if you don't, reply to everything. So, Mark, I don't know if you have it. I know you think a lot about AI.
No, I mean, I like AI. I'm very excited about the future of AI. Going back to this question, to me, and this gets into the next question, Amanda, that I'll ask you in just a moment, but when it comes to making content that sucks, a lot of people don't spend enough time planning and thinking through how they want to architect something that, to your point, I think it's very well said, is something that the audience you're trying to create a connection with and build a relationship with is going to find interesting. So it's like that classic thing where you spend 80% of your time planning, 20% of your time executing. And I think content marketers today now feel like they can take shortcuts because of some things like AI, but there's other technology too that allows you to like make it easy. And no, like you actually want to create more friction, more time in the process of creating something that is really unique and of value. So yeah, for me, it's being a bit more thoughtful about your content strategy and involving more people in the creation of the content. Like you really want to get more people to be part of that experience so that you have a diverse set of voices and it's more inclusive for the audience, I think.
Yeah. Well, say more about more people. Do you mean even just in the broadest sense? Like, are you thinking about your whole audience? Or do you mean like actually getting more stakeholders?
It's a bit about both, I think. I think there's definitely more people that can be part of the actual content that gets created and published and shared around. But then working with people inside your company to almost validate, going back to the idea of planning, some of the things you're going to create. Like, hey, we're going to spend 50, 100 hours, maybe thousands or tens of thousands of dollars creating this. Do you feel like this is something that is going to help you do your job better, which means ultimately help the company succeed more, which means it's going to hopefully add something of value and interest to the audience that we're all trying to create a partnership with, right? Build something with. So just spending more time validating ideas or assumptions or facts. So to your question, it's both in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. And I think one really good way to involve more people in your content creation is to really just be present on social media in a way that shows that you're pulling in other people's thoughts, their opinions, really rounding out your point of view. Because sometimes the way that if I have enough time and I'm able to just kind of put more thought into this, I really like asking questions on social media, like on LinkedIn, for instance, like asking people's opinion on something. And then from there, seeing how people respond to that and seeing like, maybe I can quote people, right? Or oftentimes I'll even DM them and ask them like, hey, can I ask you a couple follow-up questions on this? Would love to quote you in my upcoming blog post. It's also just a really great way to, round out the perspective, source additional quotes, even just raise other people up, right? And just even be like, hey, you had a really good opinion on this thing, and I really want people to see your point of view. Do you have more to say on this topic?
Spot on. I always say 80%, it might even be 100% now, but I've used this rule since my days at HubSpot, like 80% of your content should involve other people in the content. Like it needs to have those voices that are the actual audience or at least voices that audience wants to learn from or hear from or care about. So this might be a tough question because I want one answer, Amanda. So think long and hard. What is the biggest mistake content marketers or anyone creating content in 2024? What is that biggest mistake they're making today right now?
I think the biggest mistake people are making is making content that's too long.
Ooh, I like it. Okay. So let's unpack this now. This should get interesting. Tell us more. I'll just say tell us more first.
Yeah, I think you know that feeling, right? When a lot of times people say like, oh, that business book could have been a blog post. Now I just feel like that blog post could have been a tweet, or that blog post could have been a short LinkedIn post, right? Because I feel like so many times, and I say this as somebody who I write 2 newsletters, so I am often looking for content to link to. And I'm saying content in the sense that I'm talking about any kind of content. I'm talking about white papers, ebooks, blog posts, newsletter posts, Substacks, YouTube videos, right? Any kind of content. I'm often looking for this stuff, which means I'm often consuming this stuff. So I would say is like I'm reading a lot, I'm watching a lot, and almost every single time, I'm going to say somehow more than 9 times out of 10, although not quite 10 out of 10 times, I'm reading something or watching something and I'm like, oh my gosh, just get to the point. And I'm reading it and I'm watching it and I'm like, I get like a quarter of the way through and I'm like, that's where you should have started. So I feel like maybe even just one easy way that people can remedy this, not easy, maybe simple, right? Because simple might not be easy. One simple way to remedy this is to like finish that blog post or whatever that content is and then challenge yourself to be like, can I say this exact same thing in 70% of the time?
So I love this. I'm going to, Nick, chime in too, feel free, but there's 2 things I want to call out here. I think one of the biggest skill sets that it should be happening already, but now with the advent of all these shortcuts, whatever, is editing. Editors and editing is going to be one of the top things that a company is going to look for, especially on the marketing team. So I would love to get your reaction to that. And then another tip I'll give folks in addition to yours is this idea of bluff. Have you ever heard of bluff, Amanda?
No, I've not.
It's a military term, bottom line up front. So it goes to the point you made about get to the point. Put the bottom line, the most important thing up front, and then you can unpack it, but like don't bury the lead. What do you think though about editing, the editor piece? Like there's like content marketers. What about content editors? Hello?
We need more, right? Like, I think the tough thing is that people who don't understand editing, aka business leaders, right? Like really, the people who are not running the content day to day, but are somehow responsible for the organization or for the team, they don't really get it. Like, they don't understand editing, right? They think you're a content marketer. Like, can you just do it? Or like, can't that writer just do it? But writing and editing are two different skill sets, right? Like, not everyone's a great editor. Not everyone's a great writer. You can be a good editor, but you might not be a great writer, right? Because part of editing, and it's not all of it, part of editing is having that sensibility of like, this isn't quite right? And maybe it's pushing back on the writer or the author to say like, this idea here, this doesn't really match the tone of everything else you're saying, or like you're not using a clear enough example. I'm going to challenge you on this. You should try it again. But that editor might not know what it needs to be, right? They might know something's wrong with it, but they might not know the exact solution. And just like anybody writing, so you could be a really good writer, but like there are going to be flaws or imperfections in what you write that you might not catch yourself. Right. So, of course, people can be good at both, but not everybody is. Right. So we need good editors to challenge us on our ideas, to challenge us on our tone and our writing and our flow. And it's just a really hard skill set, I think, to hone, because I think part of it is, I mean, both writing and editing are hard, but I think to some degree, if you write a ton, you'll kind of just naturally get better. But I don't know that you can edit a ton. Right? Like what are you going to edit? You can't edit. I mean, you can try, right? But you can't really edit completed works that have already been published because they've already been edited. You could try, sure, but I don't know what good that's going to do, especially because if you're just editing, how are you going to know if it's good? Right? So if you're writing and rewriting and you just put it out there, and based on the response, you'll over time come to understand like, oh, I didn't write that very well. Or I did write this fairly well, right? You can't really test that in the same way for editing.
I was going to say after finally writing a book, which I don't recommend to anyone. It's a good point, because I don't think I'm I'm an okay writer. I'm a terrible editor, but I had to write and edit, and then the publisher was like, all right, we're bringing in our own editor. And so I was like, what are you going to edit though? Everything's already like done. What are you going to change? And she like came back to me with about like 10 pages of stuff. And I was just like, I mean, this is about 90,000 words. And I was just like, all right, so like I have to now go and change all of these things. And it was a lot, but it was like stuff that I don't know, maybe it's not my strong suit, so I wouldn't have picked up on things like this. But there was things that when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But like you said, you need someone that's like what they do and they do it well.
Right. That's really interesting. And that person might not have ever written a book, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean they're not a good editor. They obviously are. Do you know, like, was it a team that edited your book? Was it a person?
So it was a person that they contract out to edit it. And like, this is her only job. Like every book that this company publishes, like she goes and like does all the editing for it, regardless of topic.
How did you feel about getting the edits? Like, how did you feel, and what did you do next? How did you get that feedback? Like, meaning like, what did you do with it? Like, what was that next flow of work like for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was terrible because like I just wanted to be done with it. Like after doing this for like a year and a half, like I thought I shipped it off and I was like, all right, cool. They'll just go into production. It'll come out. And like now I get all these pages of edits that I have to go back and like spend more time doing. And I mean, it was like some of the things were so simple, but I was just like, can't you just edit it for me and just pop it in? And they're like, no, like you have to go do it. And like, honestly, there's a lot of things that like I don't think a typical reader reading it would pick up on, but I understand why they want to do it. But it didn't make me happy having to go back and do that, because it added hours of additional work at night that like I had to go and like spend time going through like page by page, chapter by chapter, and like going through this Google Doc and like making sure everything is checked off. But I mean, I get that's her job and like that's what she's supposed to do. So
totally. I was just sitting here thinking like, I was kind of smiling to myself because I was thinking it's like you spent a whole year making a baby and you gave birth to that baby and they're like, hey, we have feedback on this baby. And you're like, I can't change it. This is what it is. You can't give me feedback on this baby.
So true. So let's talk about, you talked a little bit about executives and leadership teams. So, what's the most common misconception from executives about content-led growth to content today. I'm sure there's a bunch of them, but if we can hone in on like one of them, like I think that would be fantastic.
I think a problem that people are still facing in this is having like a shared understanding or a shared agreement as to how content is driving business goals. I think in the worst or like the kind of most toxic version of this, a CEO is saying, you wrote these blog posts. Why don't we have more customers now? Right? Where it's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. It doesn't mean like one blog post equals 2 customers. It's not that. I think that's kind of one overall problem. And what I think executives, it's hard to say this because also like, I can't say this is true of every executive, right? Sounds like a generalization, but I'm going to try to make this broadly applicable. But I think there needs to be more understanding that content, right, is both a growth and brand play, right? Like, I think we should be figuring out business goals for content. Like, we should be figuring out ways to make sure the content we're creating is working towards getting new leads, helping those leads convert, maybe helping existing customers stay, right? Like, we should be thinking about these things. At the same time, we should not be thinking like so transactionally about like attribution and measurement, right? We can't be thinking about this like, you worked on 2 blog posts a week, every week for the past 6 months, and our customer growth only went up this much. I think it's the content's fault. It's like, I think there need to be other ways that more executives need to like track success earlier on along the way, right? Where it's not so much looking back in the past 6 months, the past year and being like, what happened? Why don't we have a better business today? Maybe it's identifying these shorter term sorts of goals so that you can feel along the way, like, I think we're onto something. I think it's going well, so that if something is not going well, you can change course, right? Or like redirect or like revisit that content strategy before you've gotten to this point of like, but there are 100 content pieces and nothing has happened. Like, there's a problem here. I think executives, need to figure out earlier on in the process, what are these, these key performance indicators? What are these KPIs?
Love that. Mark, you got anything you want to add to that?
I agree that attribution is just it's a clusterfuck. I have found to create like a customer journey. And so there's software now that's doing this better at scale with AI. So you can see out of all of the content, and even content, like the way you define content, that needs to be a little bit more cleared up, because, you came up with the term. So kudos to you. 0-click content. That's content. How is that influencing and helping a deal close or helping a customer become more loyal and become a champion? Like, how can we take all of the engagements that someone has with content, no matter if it's published on one of your owned channels, like your website, or on one of the rented channels, and understand how that changes someone's mindset or behavior to then do something that does influence or directly have an impact on revenue. So I'm bullish that some of the AI stuff can help solve this, and it becomes less of an opinion a little bit, and the data just is the data, and you can't really, fudge it that much. But when you look at the hard facts, hopefully with, hey, the data's clean, it's clean as it can be, this is what it's telling us. That's great. Let's learn from it. Let's use that to create better content, or create less content, or create more content. And it's holistically looking at all content, not just the things that are the conversion points behind a landing page. That will be a better day for everyone. So, people first GTM. It's something we talk a lot about, Amanda. It's the power of using storytelling, relationships, and partnerships to match how you go to market to how people buy. What does people first content look like in your mind?
People first content to me is just content. Like, isn't your content for people anyway?
Oh, let's pause there.
Yeah.
Let's pause there. I think a lot of us have been trained to create content for search engines.
Yeah.
A lot of us have been trained to create content. Hold on, sorry. I gotta call you out, Nick. A lot of us have been trained to create content for the LinkedIn algo. I listen to that shit. Nick, that's me. I can name a ton of people, right? And sure, okay, with LinkedIn, it's going to serve it to the right audience. I don't know. I mean, so yeah, what do you think?
You're right. I think a lot of people have been trained to write content for the algorithms, for the machine learnings, for those things. But those are trying to mimic people, right? Like when you're trying to optimize for search, it's because search is trying to optimize to serve up, well, theoretically, right? Theoretically, they're trying to serve up the most helpful content to people, right? I think with the rise of dark social, with more and more clicks or more and more searches ending without a click, it becomes more important than ever to think people first, sort of at the sacrifice of the algorithm, sort of, right? So what I mean by that is, we were talking about this earlier. I can't remember if this was before the recording or not, but talking about the notion of like when you're replying on LinkedIn, like the algorithm doesn't like it if you don't reply. What I might challenge us on is, so what? Just like do what you got to do. If you can't reply to everything, don't reply to everything because you're only human, right? Like no person thinks this person whose post I'm commenting on, they need to read every single comment and they need to leave a reply on every single comment. No rational human believes that, you know? What I'm going to say too is like, is that extra time, energy, worry, is that worth the incremental lift you might get in the algorithm? Like, is all of that worth it? Or are you better off, like, doing your best within reason and replying to, like, half of those comments? You know? And I'm going to say that, how can we think about that across everything, right? Like, you know, for your blog post that you want to get found in search, like, at some point, you might run out of keywords to target on your blog, right? Maybe after like a year or so of a keyword research focused strategy, you're going to kind of run out of keywords to go after. But you might still have content ideas you want to pursue, right? So then maybe you're not optimizing for the high volume keyword. Maybe you are just optimizing for that content to get read, maybe shared, and then later found, right? So maybe what you want is like, you want the keyword to the degree that's like, yeah, I want people to search for this keyword and find my blog post because they're looking for my blog post. Maybe that's a thought. Not so much 60,000 people a month are searching the term marketing strategy. How do I get that term? Maybe it's like, I think people, I'm going to create this content marketing guide that I think is super helpful. And I spent a lot of time writing this. I think people are going to read this, like this, and share it once they see it. So I'm going to just call my guide the Smarter Not Harder Guide to Content Marketing. Tell people about it, share it across all my platforms, all my audiences, and hopefully they'll find it. And now if you search for Smarter Not Harder Content Marketing Guide, you'll find Sparktoro's or my blog post on this, right? Sure, I could check the keyword volume on that. I'm sure it's like 1, like I'm sure it's not high. It probably isn't there. But in my mind, I am not trying to rank for content marketing guide because HubSpot claimed that spot 15 years ago. I'm not going to get it. And do I think that content marketers, that they all would benefit from HubSpot's content marketing guide today? Sorry, but I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be the best content, even though it probably ranks number 1. Do I think mine is the best? No, because the best is also subjective, right? Like, I believe mine is very helpful. I believe it is valuable. I believe it is going to be impactful for content marketers of any level, but I can never know if it's going to be the best. One person, I'm sure, will say it's the best. Just like I'm sure 10 other people are going to say it's fine, right? So the best I can do is write content for people who I believe are going to read it, like it, and share it, and make sure that it's easily findable for the people who know that exists.
Yeah, well said. Focus a lot less on the channel, maybe 25% on the channel. Focus 75% on what's going to make that piece of content get passed around person to person.
Right. And things like, right, you can always take a sort of SEO or like algorithm informed approach to content, right? Like, yeah, like write content you think people want to read. Like, of course, right? Post your content in such a way that you think it's going to be algorithmically rewarded. Sure. Like, of course we should do these things, but I don't think this means, oh, the LinkedIn algorithm doesn't like when I post polls. I don't know. I'm making this up. This is not true. The LinkedIn algorithm doesn't like it when I use polls. Therefore, I'm never going to do polls. I don't think that's the takeaway, right? I think the takeaway is going to be like, wow, I really wanted to publish polls. So how can I do this in a way that is going to get amplified and not so much, oh, the algorithm doesn't like it, so I'm never going to do it.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to get your head around because we've been trained by these algorithms and they're trained to make money for the companies. So it is a slippery slope, and it's not easy to just, because you're serving two masters, to figure out which master you're going to serve. But I would encourage everyone to listen to what Amanda just said and serve more the person versus the algo. Nick, do you want to get to the really deep stuff? You want to get to the deep stuff now?
Yeah, let's dive in. So head on over to find this exclusive conversation on TAC Network. We're going to be diving into Amanda's proven framework. Excited for that. And we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of GTM News Desk, presented by the TAC Network. To hear our full conversation with our guest today, head to the link in the show notes to subscribe to the TAC Network. Until next time, I'm Mark Killens.
And I'm Nick Bennett. Keep it people first, everybody.